The Israel-Hamas war and its global economic fallout. You know, everyone has talked about the politics of the Israel and Hamas war, but very few people have slowed down to ask, what did this war actually do to the global economy? And this is because sometimes the economic cost tells a deeper story than the politics. So let's take that side today. My name is Dr. Dide Adewale and welcome to my channel. Let's pick on the Red Sea and the Suez. What was the real shockwave, or that was the real shockwave? So first of all, the biggest economic shock wasn't oil. It was shipping. This one surprised a lot of people. So when the conflict spilled over into the Red Sea, ships literally started avoiding the Suez Canal. And that's huge because almost 12% of global trade passes through that corridor. So by early 2024, Suez Canal traffic had fallen by almost 50%. So think about that. That means half the ships that normally pass through had to reroute around the Cape, had to reroute through the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10, sometimes 14 days, to the journey. Just imagine a delay of about 10 to 14 days for something that used to be like a normal trade route. So when ships take longer, everything becomes more expensive. Your fuel becomes expensive, insurance, delivery times, they become more expensive. And you see, that's why the freight rates jumped. So, and that's why retailers in Europe and Africa saw delays and higher costs. It's a reminder that in today's world, logistics is everything. So you would have thought maybe because it was in the Middle East, the oil prices would be the first hit, but no. Logistics, the shipping costs, delays and all of this contributed to that factor. So let's take a look at the oil prices and how that risk faded away. So when the war started, everyone panicked and said the oil will hit about $150. So OPEC, is going to squeeze supply. Those were the narratives in the news. The Middle East will explode, oil politics will take a downturn and all of that. But what actually happened? Oil had a small spike and then the market calmed down. And why did this happen? Because the conflict stayed geographically contained. And secondly, the biggest story was actually oversupply. So non-OPEC producers like the US, Brazil, and Guyana were pumping more oil than expected. So even though the war created uncertainty on how the oil price will increase and all of that, the underlying fundamentals kept the oil in between the $60 and $70 price range. I know it's wild, right? But yeah. So a major Middle East war, yes, but the dominant force shaping oil prices was actually the global supply and not the conflict. So let's look at it now diplomatically. I would say here that this diplomatic sides rest upon the pressure on US and also China's quiet moves. So diplomatically, we're seeing something interesting where the United States has been in the spotlight in terms of ceasefire negotiation attempts, pressure from the allies, internal political tension, But in all of this, America has been very exposed. Meanwhile, China has been quiet, calculated, and almost silent. I don't think there's the news where you see China is trying to bring about negotiations between the two parties. But in as much as China is quiet, they are still expanding their influence. So remember, this is the same China that brokered the Iran and Saudi deal. So you see, while the US is busy becoming like the big brother, while the US is carrying the diplomatic weight publicly, China is building long-term trust quietly. So we're entering into a world where global diplomacy is no longer one directional. and it's actually now multipolar. So let's look at food and Africa, how, this applied and rippled into Africa. And I would say that, Africa was actually the hidden victims, contrary to the oil. Yes, logistics, became an issue, but the economic effect of this situation was actually very evident in Africa. They were the hidden victims, not so talked about in the news, but yes. And now let's talk about how that is deeply important because of how this relates to food prices in Africa. So because the global south, especially North and East Asia, especially those ones, they felt this war sharply. And why? Because when the ships avoided Suez, the cost of transporting wheat, rice, fuel, medicines all went up. And Africa already is experiencing economic downturn, poverty, drought, all sorts of things. So this kind of brought the underlying factors of poverty to the bare front, where countries like Egypt took a double hit. First, there was less revenue from Suez Canal tolls, which was a major contribution to their revenue and income, and also higher import bills. So you see the FAO food index has come down, from the 2022 crisis, but it's still above the pre-pandemic levels. And you see, and regions that are dependent on imports through that Suez Canal felt it the most. So how did it work for sub-Saharan Africa? We just talked about the east side of things, but how did this actually work for sub-Saharan Africa? I would say it's simply this way. When freight goes up, everything goes up. Fuel, fertilizer, machinery, food, and everything. So it's still the same ripple effect. And this is how the conflict in the Middle East becomes a cost of living crisis for thousands of miles away. So you can see how the things happening in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, is causing a ripple effect in Africa just through one trade route, through one, Suez and the red, should I call it the red choke? So what this war reveals, I would say, is that the first economic shock was the shipping, not oil, and the second was food prices, especially in import dependent regions. And the third was diplomacy shifting between the US under pressure and China positioning quietly. And I would say the third one may be the reminder that the global supply chains are fragile after all. So in today's world, one choke point like the Suez Canal or one strait can actually change prices globally. So let's bring it home and see. So my question to you now is, now that we have seen how fragile the global economy is, we have seen how, just one blockage in a particular trade route can cause spike in food prices, spike in fertilizer, spike in insurance. When we've seen how fragile the global economy can be, how do we go forward? Or what matters going forward? Is it the security of our trade routes or the politics of oil? And oil is coming to play here because it's particularly centered around the Middle East, what happened in the Middle East. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And if you found this, very useful, I want to know your view and your input on these topics, because economics would have thought, oh yeah, bang, oil prices first. But it was not that case. It was different. It was shipping, logistics. So let me know your thoughts. Send me a message or leave me a comment. Let's have a discussion. Till I see you again, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And there's going to be a part 2 of this discussion on how this war has actually affected Nigeria, which is the giant of Africa, and also rippled into the United Kingdom. What was the economic effects or economic consequences of this war in Nigeria and in Europe? So watch out for the part 2 in my next video. Till I see you again, take care.